Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to episode 2 of the Courage to Change, a Recovery podcast. Today, we will be interviewing Bahan McDermott. Bahan is the Director of Admissions at Lionrock Recovery. She is originally from the East Coast, now living in Southern California with her fiance, stepsons, and golden retriever, Ghillie. She is actually celebrating 6 years clean and sober today. And what a way to reflect on her time being sober than to share her story with us. Bahan is going to walk us through her journey with domestic violence and alcoholism, which resulted in her abuser going to prison. I'm really excited for you guys to hear this story of strength, perseverance, and the courage to change. All right, episode 2, let's do this. All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Courage to Change, a Recovery podcast. We have Bahan McDermott, and I am so excited to have her on the podcast today. Thank you for taking the time. You're celebrating 6 years sober today. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What's that like?
You know, it feels kind of surreal. I spent some time this morning just reflecting on the gratitude I have, for where I am today. It's a lot different than it was 6 years ago.
Yeah, I bet. It's if you're doing it right, that's usually the case.
That's the hope.
Yeah, and I think that knowing that someone's 6 years sober is awesome, but knowing where someone came from is a really big part of what we do in recovery, is understanding what kind of things people have overcome. And I really wanted to have you on this podcast because your story is unique in that you were able to get out of a very serious domestic violence relationship that even had legal proceedings involved. And I think that was a big part of your alcoholism and your story. And what's amazing about that is that so many people, we talk about the disease, but we don't talk about the pieces of the disease that don't look like alcohol, that aren't included. We don't classically consider it included in the alcoholism, but it's all part of the same thing, trying to achieve the same thing. And I talked about how I was in a domestic violence relationship and how that contributed to my downward spiral. So today, I know you as an amazing sober woman who has this great, big, beautiful life, but I understand that it was not always like that. As someone recovering and doing that reflection, on your 6 years, where does your alcoholism start? Where did you start to see it? Where did you start when you were a kid, or can you help us understand kind of what that looked like for you?
Sure. So, I looking back now certainly feels a lot different than I think it did in the moment. I think I'm better able to identify the pieces that contributed to my alcoholism as they come together, over time, kind of zooming out. But I definitely look back and remember, a lot of people who struggle with alcoholism talk about feeling different. And, I had a lot of friends and I had a good, support network among friends and family. So there wasn't any particular thing in my childhood that would have indicated a budding alcoholic. But I certainly always struggled with a deep sense of insecurity. And I remember when I was, I think 13 years old, I was, stealing alcohol from my parents and smoking cigarettes, and the rest of my friends were like just starting to notice boys and still playing with Barbies. I mean, it was definitely something that set me aside from the rest of the people around me. So I would say it began at a pretty young age, but it definitely developed over time in a way that you couldn't ignore.
Right. When you say that people couldn't ignore it, did your family, what did that look like when people couldn't ignore it?
My family got really concerned about me probably around high school age, when freshman, sophomore year of high school, when I started not showing up to class, not showing up to school at all. They would get phone calls, where is she? My behavior was out of control. There were definitely signs, I think more my behavior, that my parents didn't understand. They didn't know what was going on with me, but certainly indications that something was wrong and something was off. But I think they were just so unfamiliar with the territory. They didn't know what was happening.
Right. And how much were you drinking in high school?
I was drinking at least every weekend. I was smoking marijuana, throughout the week, and then probably towards sophomore year of high school, I was starting to do harder drugs like cocaine and ecstasy throughout the week with friends. I definitely found like companions in high school and people who
you were doing ecstasy during the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We were.
It's a full-time party gig.
It certainly was. I didn't have any time to attend history or English class or do any of the assignments.
It was a weekly rave.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes a 2 or 3 person rave.
But yes, I remember those.
Yeah. So there were definitely. I mean, there was serious erratic behavior going on that began to get identified as mental health stuff, because my family, I think, was I wasn't going to tell them
of
everything
course
that was going on. So
that's such a classic thing. I remember going to the doctor, going to a psychiatrist, and he's like, "You're bipolar," and I didn't want to tell him that I was actually detoxing from cocaine, which looks a lot like bipolar. Totally get that.
Exactly. And I was willing to take any medications they were going to give me, so I was willing to sign up for whatever.
Totally.
Mental
I was
health
like,
disease.
Bipolar sounds about right. Feels like that. Sure does.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So what was your family environment like? Did you grow up with alcoholic parents?
No. So my family environment was an incredibly secure, supportive environment. I came from very well-educated parents who, were pretty strict about the way, our manners and respecting people, and really wanted us to succeed intellectually. And, they honestly were just super supportive, loving people, who I guess you could say were that kind of like that well-bred East Coast family.
Right. Yeah. I think we came from the same place. In those families, a lot of the time, if you do well in school, or at least was my experience, that a lot of the time, like, that was the benchmark for whether or not things were going well, was how is school going? Did you experience some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting, as I've moved out to California, living now in an environment in Orange County where your level of success is determined by the expensive car you drive. Back on the East Coast, it was where did you go to, high school, and where did you go to college? It was all about the education. And that was an indication that you were a successful person. It was more defined by your intellect. And so if you went to the right schools and you got the right grades and you knew the right people, as far as, that world goes, then that was a definition of like things were okay.
Right. And if you could keep that together, I grew up mostly on the East Coast, but my parents are New Englanders, and actually our moms went to high school together.
I know.
That's a whole
world.
other story. But my parents, the same thing. And I actually hid behind that a lot. Like, I knew that if I could keep my grades up, or I knew that if I could keep the education piece going, that I could hide behind that and say, well, my school's still going well. My grades are still good,
Right.
When did you know you had a problem?
Gosh, that's an interesting question, because for a long time, I think I went in and out of stages of denial where, in high school, I felt like I was just having fun and enjoying myself until I noticed that I was doing a lot of things that other people weren't doing. And I would hear about people kind of talking about me behind my back in a way, like I was a very popular person in high school, but in a way that I was that girl who was like so far, had crossed that line that people just didn't cross in high school.
Yeah.
So I think the indication that I had a problem was when I was sent away in junior year of high school. And
I was removed
when
from
I
my
was
environment.
physically removed. I'll never forget the principal calling me into his office and just saying, I don't know what to do with you. Like, you are by far one of the hardest cases. I mean, the fact that I was like a case in high school, and it was a small high school. So, I was in a class of, I think, 400, and of the years and years and years that he had been doing this, he had no idea what to do with me. I spent hours and hours in the guidance counselor's office, against my own will because they were trying to help me. And, I would get passes to go to therapy appointments, and I would just go and get high. And it was a quick spiral out of control. And so that was an indication that something wasn't right when I got sent off to a wilderness program and subsequently, a therapeutic boarding school. And then
where'd you go?
I went to Second Nature, which was a wilderness program I'm sure you're familiar with.
Oh, I am. Duchesne?
Yes,
Duchesne?
in Duchesne, Utah.
Yeah.
So I spent a couple months in the Moab Desert and then went off to Montana Academy, which is they call it, therapeutic boarding school, but it's really treatment for adolescents. And
that therapeutic part's pretty intense.
Yes, exactly. Took a couple of classes there and earned my high school diploma from Montana Academy. So that was an indication, but then after that...
Did you want to get well? Like, it was an indication, but were you thinking to yourself, you know what, this is seriously out of control. Like, I really need to pull it together. Or what were you thinking?
I was thinking, sure, maybe I need to pull it together. That was probably, some things kind of were a bit rocky there, but I also thought that all that, therapy and stuff that I got was enough of like a fix that sort of realigned me, got me recalibrated and back on track, that I thought I was okay.
You were like, yeah, that was fine. I'm ready to put me in, coach.
Yeah, exactly. Let's throw me back in. I'm ready to go back.
These people are awfully dramatic.
Seriously, I mean, I sort of thought, all right, I took it a little far every once in a while, but I'm actually okay, and I applied for college and moved back to the East Coast, got reacclimated to society.
From the desert.
Right. So, and from the rural part of Montana. So, so I went back to the East Coast and, things were kind of okay for a little bit.
So did you go back and go to college?
Yep. I went back to the East Coast, went to college in Massachusetts, close to home. And, right before I started college, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try this not drinking thing. But I didn't understand sobriety. It was more of an abstinence thing. Like, I went to a couple of meetings in, like, AA meetings when I was in Montana, but I don't ever remember hearing a message. Okay. I remember being there, but I remember going because it was a place I could go and, like, smoke cigarettes and hang out after curfew.
Right. Okay.
So I remember thinking I was going to try this abstinence thing, and it lasted, I think, maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks.
So you were going to do it on your own.
Right. Well, I didn't know any other way.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was I didn't know that there was another way to do it.
So the therapeutic boarding school, they did the therapy part, but they didn't actually address what it would mean if you had an addiction to substances and all that time.
Right. It was much more focused on mental health.
And yet, don't you think addiction has a huge mental health component?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think there's ingrained in addiction is, I think, a lot of mental health stuff that manifests in many different ways. But I think I was being, I was being medicated,
right,
rather than treated.
Yes, that's a huge component. So you get back, you stay sober you're abstinent for a week.
Yeah.
Then then you start drinking again. How would that look like?
Then I thought, it was the cocaine and like the tequila and vodka that was a problem. Right. So I'm just going to drink beer and wine.
Right.
So I had a lot of friends. I let's just put it this way. I still had some friends, but I had a lot of friends that were kind of like afraid of me. So I had a couple of friends who would still spend time with me, but I think a lot of people saw me as a liability. So the few friends that would hang out with me still were like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you can do this drinking thing? So,
and you were like, oh yeah, I've been abstinent for a week. Right. I'm ready.
So, yeah, coming back dry from Montana and Utah and thinking, okay, I got this. And I really thought maybe I was just losing it. And now I'm I've got these coping skills that they taught me. And so I started drinking beer and wine. And I'll tell you that quickly escalated right back to where things were before. All of a sudden it was, well, beer and wine, those are going okay. And I can seem to do okay with that. So it'll be beer, wine, and vodka. I'll stay away from the drugs. And then it was, it got out of control pretty quickly again.
Right. So you're trying to negotiate with the substances. Like, okay, if I get rid of this substance, then it'll be okay if I get rid of that substance.
Sure.
And it sounds like there were drugs involved, but you were mainly drinking very, very heavily.
Yeah, I mean there were certainly drugs involved at every point in my journey, but I always say that, alcohol is like my one true love when it comes to substances. That was always like where it always began and ended with alcohol.
Right.
And I was now in college where the excessive drinking was socially acceptable.
I know it's a very confusing place for people with alcoholism.
Absolutely, because binge drinking is just like part of what people do, and you can very easily surround yourself by people who are doing what you're doing that normalize it for you.
Yeah. It's interesting to watch it from. I have 2 younger sisters, and it's interesting to watch it from the perspective of being sober. I was sober when they went through college and saw this binge drinking, not necessarily them, but the people around them, and would think to myself, oh, that's what alcoholism looks like. But in that environment, people excuse it. It's totally acceptable. Right. But then as soon as you're out, that's when it's no longer acceptable.
Right. And so, as soon as you've graduated from college and everybody else is going to their 9-to-5 job and you can't seem to show up, more than 2 days a week or whatever that is. So.
I always thought that was interesting. Like, if you drink mimosas in the morning, then it's okay, or a Bloody Mary at this time. Like, there are rules of alcoholism that I felt like I didn't get the handbook for.
Right.
Like, I was drinking the wrong drink in the morning, but if I had been drinking a different drink, then I wouldn't have been an alcoholic. It would have been acceptable.
Totally.
Like bottomless mimosas. Apparently that's a totally normal thing. Very confusing. Like, if you binge drink in if you binge drink in college, that's normal. But if you, the day you graduate, if you continue to do it, there are a lot of interesting societal excuses or circumstances where alcoholic behavior is allowed to be okay.
Yeah, and I think a lot of situations that allow a person with alcoholic thinking the ability to rationalize why they're not sick.
Yes.
Which can be very confusing, because there are certainly people out there who are heavy drinkers who can do the things that alcoholics do and not have a problem with it.
Right. No, it's definitely confusing. So you go through college. Did you graduate?
I did, and I actually graduated with almost a 4.0 GPA. I did phenomenally in college, which was surprising because it was all through my college experience, sophomore year and on, that I had started dating a guy where I was found myself in an abusive relationship. So I look back on that experience of college where I was able to get almost, perfect grades. It's like, how was I doing that when I was an alcoholic in an abusive relationship? I still to this day have no idea how I achieved that.
It's incredibly impressive, because it was just not my story. So you started dating. Did he go to college with you?
No, he actually, I met him when he was visiting a friend of mine over a weekend who went to the same college as me. So he was a friend from my friend's hometown. So he was visiting somebody at my college.
And what year was that? What grade was that?
Sophomore year.
Sophomore year of college, okay. Mm-hmm. And what did your drinking look like?
So it's interesting. My drinking at that point was probably Thursday, Friday, Saturday, day drinking Sunday. I mean, like, it was light.
Yeah, totally.
It was light at that point.
It was light at that point. Okay.
So, you had Thirsty Thursday, and then you naturally had to drink Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday to prepare for the week.
Yeah.
But that was sort of the normal drinking, and I look back at, after meeting him, how my drinking changed and began to change throughout the course of our relationship. So it definitely got worse, and it transformed in different ways.
So you're saying he was an alcoholic?
Yeah. I can't be one to say that only he can decide
So
that.
you're saying that he had alcoholic traits?
Yes, he definitely had alcoholic traits for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so take us through how do we get to the place where you're heavily drinking?
Gosh, that didn't take too long. I mean, heavily drinking, God, it was heavy, and then it just got heavier and heavier and heavier. But it was probably within that year and even my roommates, so I was living in the dorms at that point, and even my roommates started saying things like, man, you're drinking a lot. Like, I was drinking Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I was drinking, after classes at night by myself in our dorm suite,
Right.
just watching TV, drinking,
Right.
trying to find stuff to do on a Monday night when everybody else is like in the library
Right.
studying.
Right.
So, I would call this guy who I had met, and we had quickly decided that we were going to be a couple, however that happened. And he would be at home drinking, and I would be like, oh, well, okay, when we're talking on the phone, well, I guess I'll make a drink. And I just found myself kind of falling into that, like finding, oh, well, if he's drinking, it must be okay. I found a lower companion.
Right.
I found somebody who, if he was doing it, then it must be okay.
Right. Right. That the excuse to normalize what we're doing.
Exactly.
So what happened in that relationship?
So when I first met him, he was nice and charming and well-dressed and pulled together and sweet. And he was, just an all-around attractive person. And he, I don't know, I now look back at this statement thinking, well, that's actually not true. But at the time, I felt like he swept me off my feet.
Right.
In a college drinking, party.
Yeah, I get that.
Playing flip cup. Mm-hmm. So it's very romantic.
Yeah, it's very sophisticated and romantic.
All best relationships start off.
Yes.
Yeah, so the relationship started off just kind of like this infatuation with each other. Just remember it being super intense and thinking, wow, this guy is great. Up until then, I'd had sort of flaky relationships, and this just seemed like an intense investment in one another. And things were good for a long time, I would say. For the first year, things felt pretty good. And I noticed some sort of strange behavior. So this guy ended up being super violent and very abusive. And people ask, like, how did you end up in a relationship like that? And it's like, we didn't meet, and he, punched me in the face. Like, things were good for a long time. But I do remember him making some comments about, me going out with friends at college. Are you going out this weekend? Controlling sort of comments about what are you doing? Where are you going? Wanting to know what I was up to, where I had always lived like, I do what I want, with
right.
my parents, with,
right.
that was just my attitude. I always did what I wanted. So this was a little unusual for me.
So this was a gradual.
Very gradual. It was very sneaky. So it was sort of some control about what I was doing at college. So I stopped going out with friends as often. And I remember friends kind of getting frustrated with me because I wasn't as social as I used to be. And I was a lot of times the life of the party. I was very well connected. So I also had friends who were kind of mad at me because I knew where all the parties were. And they were like, come on, you're the person who takes us out.
Right.
So it started with that, and that actually in turn led me to moving off campus and moving into an apartment by myself. That's how sort of twisted the mind control was around that. I just, was like, okay, well, I'm going to move away from he was very protective of me being around other guys.
Right.
So I thought, oh, that's so sweet.
Totally.
So
it means they love us.
Right. He loves me, wants me all for himself.
Yep.
So I moved off campus, so I would be away from that scene and safe from, the looks of other men. And then, there were things that would happen where we'd be sitting at a dinner table together, and I remember what I said, but there would be some comment made, and he would pinch my leg really hard under the table. Mm-hmm. And I would, I remember the first time it happening thinking, why are you doing that? That really hurt. And it was not like a little, like it was a pretty, like it would leave bruises.
Yep.
So little things like that. And then, grabbing my arm to the point where it would leave a thumbprint. So it was bit by bit. It was very,
Yeah.
I don't know if insidious is the right word,
Yeah.
but
No, it's gradual. It's really interesting to hear you talk about that, because when I reflect on the relationship that I was in, which really didn't lead to where yours did, but it actually started with pinching.
oh yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because it's gradual. You don't opt into a relationship with someone who you know is, you're so shocked when they do those things that you don't even know how to react.
Totally. Well, and you don't want to believe it. You think, well, that's strange, and you sweep that under the rug.
Right. I'm not the kind of girl who is in a relationship where someone hurts them. I mean,
Totally.
I would never put up with that. Those are the things that you think about yourself.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. You never imagine that that's actually what's taking place. And there's also a lot of, when I finally made my way out of that relationship, I just remember feeling completely brainwashed. Like my mind was just it was completely flipped around. I didn't know what was up, what was down. It's crazy the level of control, just sort of the way that your brain rewires itself.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. In our first podcast, I talked about that you like understand what happened to the women in Charles Manson's group. Like it,
Totally.
I never understood how the women were convicted of doing something, like that he was convicted of doing something that he never did, but the mind control is so intense. It's so real, and you almost have to experience it to really understand, to like at the depths of your, and your core understand what that is like, because it's pretty, it seems impossible until you're there.
Absolutely.
So what ended up happening?
So I'm trying to think of the most important details to share, but over the course of 4.5 years, the abuse escalated just significantly, each year as it went by, just more and more and more abuse. And the abuse started off, with the little physical stuff, but a lot of the emotional and psychological abuse. And then it got more and more physical. And I'll never forget the first time he actually hit me in the face in the apartment that I had moved into. I'll never forget that. That was almost like a line that had been crossed. And after that, it was like there was no going back. And from there, it just, got worse. The first time he hit me, we were actually in my bathroom in the apartment, and I was at that time prescribed Ambien, which was awesome. For
nothing like a good night's sleep.
Oh yeah, I remember waking up and my refrigerator had been taken apart, and it was all over my apartment, like all of the drawers and all of the shelving. I'd taken it apart.
Not known.
When I combined Ambien and alcohol. Don't ever do that. So he, being, the good alcoholic that he probably is, he had to wake up the next morning. He wanted one of my Ambien. He was always trying to steal my drugs.
Rude.
Right. And they're prescribed to me.
There are manners.
Yeah. And I had very strict policies, following the doctor's orders on when the bottle says my name, you can't have any. So he wanted some Ambien, and I told him I wouldn't give it to him because I wanted it for myself. And I had some friends over. And he just being the narcissist that he was, he backhanded me in the bathroom. And I remember just falling against the towel rack and, bruising my arm on the towel rack and just thinking, holy smokes, I can't believe that just happened. Like, I can't believe that he just hit me.
And your friends were in the house.
My friends were in the house. And I came out of the bathroom and they knew something was wrong. I mean, we're all drinking, but they knew something was wrong, and I was having trouble breathing. I was like, okay, that didn't just happen.
Right,
that
totally.
Didn't just happen.
Because it's so shocking.
Completely shocking. I was like, I could not wrap my head around the fact that was a reality.
Right.
So I just proceeded to sit back down with my friends and continue to drink. He went to bed. I think I maybe ended up giving him the Ambien. I don't really remember, but all of a sudden I was having trouble breathing and I couldn't catch my breath. And my friends looked at me and they asked what was wrong. And I said, I don't know. I think I'm having an allergy attack. I'm having trouble breathing. And turns out brilliant. Turns out I was having a panic attack, but I didn't know it. So they took me, they woke him up and they all took me to the ER. And he came into the doctor's into the room with me when the doctor was in there. And the doctor asked me, have you ever, like doctors do, have you ever, been physically harmed or anything like that? And I said no. And he never asked him to leave. The doctor never asked him to leave, which I think doctors should always do to give you the safety and the privacy that you need to maybe talk about that. Not that I necessarily would have, but I think that doctors should do that.
That's a really good point. Did you have any was your face red at all or anything from that situation that they would have noticed?
I honestly don't remember, but I'll never forget that, my ex was sitting with me and he said, she overreacts with everything and she's having a panic attack or she's having anxiety. So then the doctor introduced me to Klonopin, which was amazing. So all of these things that lead, deeper and deeper. I mean, they're all just, it's amazing looking at how all of the connecting dots, like they all just, feed into my alcoholism and also my reasoning behind why I didn't have, a drinking problem. But, but over time, I mean, the abuse got so aggressive that it was a regular thing where I'd have one black eye or the other, ribs broken. I still to this day have a broken bone in my nose and my face. I look, I think, relatively normal, but
you look normal to me.
Thanks. Yeah, but I mean the scars are on the inside. But I definitely was. It got to a place where I knew at one point. I mean, I was strangled on many occasions and was told that ways that my body was going to be disposed of, and I continued to tell myself, I can't believe I'm in this situation, but I was terrified to leave and I was terrified to stay. And I think it got to the point, and I'll never forget this moment, where I finally realized that if I did not leave, I was going to die. And thankfully, before that time, the months leading up to that point where it was getting so bad, where I had been to the ER several times, gotten stitches in my lip. He split my lip open, and I kept being very literally beaten to a pulp. I had started documenting what some of the, I have pictures of my black eyes and the bruises all over my body. And I started taking pictures of all of this stuff to let my family know what had happened to me when I died. Like, I wanted my family to know that, that he had done this, that for them to have a peace of mind, I guess. I don't really know, but I just felt some obligation for them to be aware of what had happened to me.
What's coming to mind, I mean, aside from trying not to cry listening to that happen to you, I'm pretty sure my producer is crying. What's coming to mind for me is the way that you're talking about it is the way that we also talk about our relationship with alcohol and drugs. And that feeling, you said, like, I can't live with it, I can't live without it. And same with him. And that you took these photos, like, in your mind, you were gonna die from him, from this. Like, in your mind, there was no way out. There was no way out. And so you were going to do, the next best thing. And that's, that mindset is something that you just don't ever think you're going to be there.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, I did not. It's not one of those things that you sign up for.
Yeah.
Or that you think is, I mean, telling this story now, and there's so many details that I've shared with people over the years, and I'm always, willing and open to share the details of that relationship, of my, struggles with substance abuse, because there are so many people who are struggling, who are afraid to talk about these things. But when I tell the details and I talk about the story, like, I still can't believe that it was my life.
Yeah.
Like, I still feel sitting here today like, oh my God,
who is this girl?
did I really sit through that and endure that and get to a place of acceptance where like, yeah, I'm just going to die. So I might as well just like, take a couple photos. And I'll never forget this one experience where I had this, a BlackBerry back in the day, and I had taken all these pictures on, and I swear to God, this is, God, the universe, my higher power, whatever, but I had this BlackBerry had taken all these pictures on, and there was some violent eruption, as there normally was, but he took that phone and smashed it to bits. I mean, complete bits. And I panicked, and I took the bits of the phone, the remnants of the phone. I had 2 black eyes at that point. I put on sunglasses. I mean, I looked like a complete mess. I went down to the Verizon wireless store, sunglasses on, wouldn't take them off in public. And I said, is there anything you can do with this phone? And they said, no. I mean, what?
Yeah. When you say do with this, what exactly do you mean?
They looked at the phone and they said, what happened? And just like I made excuses of walking into walls and doors and, all that kind of stuff for the excuses for my bruises, I made up an excuse. I told them that one of my brothers had an insane party and somebody, I don't even know, somebody smashed it somehow. Right. And they said, well, all we can do is give you a replacement phone. And I said, can you transfer anything off of that phone? And they said, your contacts are all gone. We'll see what we can do. The only thing that was saved was the photos.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So what did you do with the photos? How did you get out?
So the photos actually became a key piece of my story. I one day, it was just honestly... It had gotten to a point where it was actually shortly after that experience, but I had 2 black eyes. I mean, handprints on my neck, on my arms, all over my body. I mean, I looked, thinking about like the family I come from and what I looked like I didn't belong.
Yeah.
I looked like I belonged, and, not to talk about stereotypes or anything like that, but it just it didn't add up. Like the pieces didn't add up.
Right. It's unimaginable.
Right. So,
did they know? Were they around? Like, did you see them?
My family. So I did a really, really good job of, I learned how to expertly put on foundation and makeup. Mm-hmm. I just was when I was seen, I made it very short.
Yeah.
To a point where, I'd wear always long sleeve pants and shirts. I would cover it up as best as I could. There were a couple of times where things were questioned, but I think my family, never imagined.
It's so out of this world.
Yeah.
That's not right. That makes sense.
They never imagined something like that was going on. But at this point, it had gotten to a place, I hadn't seen my family in a couple of weeks, and it had gotten to a place where I realized there's no hiding this. It had gotten so bad that there was no way I could hide any of it. And I'll never forget deciding I have to leave. I'm going to die if I don't leave. And walking out of the apartment he was staying in and realizing that I was never going back. And they talk about, I like to call, people who have struggled with domestic violence survivors, not victims, but those who have survived domestic violence go back an average of 7 times before they actually leave the final time. And that definitely was the case for me. And I went home to my family. I didn't put makeup on that time, and I just walked in the door and I took off my sunglasses, and my family they just lost it. They didn't know what to do with that situation. They couldn't even imagine, like, oh my God. They were completely broken down about it. And we sat in my living room, and my parents asked me, they said, what do you want to do? And they went over, the options with me. They said, do we need to take you somewhere to be safe? Like, do we need to send you away? Do you want to go to the police? So we walked through the options. My father called the district attorney, who he happened to know, and talked about those options. And I decided to move forward and press charges. And, my family said, we'll support you 100% of the way if this is what you want to do. And it was one of the most difficult decisions to make, because in that moment I still loved him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And what do you think What do you think brought you to choose that option?
At that time, I was doing it for other people.
Okay.
I was doing it more for, not for myself, because I was such a shell of myself. Like, I was such a shell of myself. I had so little emotional connection to what had happened because it had become a defense mechanism for me.
Right.
I had to protect myself
Right.
in that
You had
way.
to shut down.
Right. So my psyche, I guess, had learned how to do that. And so I was doing it for other women at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that like? Pressing charges, did that go through?
Yeah, I mean, it was a grueling process. I thought it was going to be relatively swift and easy, and we'll just go through this real quick.
Right.
I went down to the police station. They took additional pictures. They had I gave them my photos that I never took those photos with any thought in my mind that I would ever be involved in, legal action.
Yeah.
So when I talked about that being like such a key piece, I mean, it was amazing that I had that evidence. So I went down and I, sat down with some detectives and they photographed me, and I went to a hospital, and that's where they found all these old broken bones, in my face, and fresh broken bone. My nose was broken at the time. So they, had all these records and everything documented. And they told me that it would take 6 months. They said, it's going to be hard, but it will take 6 months, start to finish. Here's what the process entails. It took 2.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So.
Oh my gosh.
From the time I went into the police station to the end of the whole process, it was 2.5 years. And that's the result of, I think, a broken judicial system. That is the result of the defense attorney in this case coming up with a slew of, inexcusable reasons to continue the case and what it really was. And I truly understand why most women do not follow through with pressing charges and through with cases. They were trying to intimidate me the entire time. I mean, there were so many things that took place.
Like what?
Well, they would try and, pull for old, therapy records and things that had,
oh my gosh.
That he knew that I had gone to Wilderness and therapeutic boarding school. Things that did not pertain to the case. They just try to exhaust you, and they just drag you through so many things where you get ready, you prepare to face your abuser in a trial, and then last minute they say, oh, we have to continue. We need 3 more months. We need 5 more months. So I consistently had to prepare with the assistant district attorney to testify over and over and over again.
So did you eventually testify?
Yep. I 2.5 years later, the trial date was set. There were no more continuances allowed, and I testified for 6.5 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Was he in the room?
Yep. He was in the room. I had to look at him and address the questions that his lawyer, the cross-examination, which was absolutely brutal, because you're prepared to answer your lawyer's questions,
right,
but you're never prepared to answer the things that they're going to ask of you. So,
right.
Yeah, they try to make you out to, they put you on trial.
Right.
Somebody who's endured just massive abuse, they try and, point the finger at you. And it's an incredibly flawed system. And of course, innocent until proven guilty is totally understandable. And I'm all for justice for those who are guilty and freedom for those who aren't. But it's, it's a crazy experience. And I actually had, I had some jurors come up to me the day after the trial was over. So after the last day of the trial is conviction, and then the next day is sentencing. And during sentencing, so he was convicted of several felonies. And unfortunately, the jury on my case didn't understand beyond reasonable doubt. Nobody explained that to them. So he was charged, I think, with 10 different 10 different actual charges. But the only ones, I think 6 out of the 10 that he was convicted on, both felonies and misdemeanors, were directly connected to my photographic evidence. So that was the significance of me taking those photos, is that they felt like they needed to corroborate the evidence to the actual specific dates of the charges. So thank God I had those photos. And I had jurors come up to me, the day of sentencing when they were allowed to talk to me, and they just, talked about my bravery and that they believed me. And he actually got up on the stand and testified himself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about narcissism.
Yeah. No kidding.
So he went to jail.
Yeah, he went to prison.
He went to prison.
Yeah, he went to prison he was sentenced to 2.5 years because, first offender.
2.5 years.
2.5 years, yeah. I think he only served 2 and was let out. And I just got a phone call from his parole officer, probation department last year, letting me know that he's finally off of probation.
How did that feel?
It felt... It felt surreal. I mean, I almost was like, who are you talking about?
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, you have the wrong number. It just felt bizarre.
Like, who is that girl?
Right. Yeah. Like I'm about to get married this year, and I'm getting a phone call from, this.
From the past.
Yeah. Oh my God. Insane.
How do you think that your alcoholism related to that? Because the relationship and the alcoholism, how many stories do we hear of young women in the throes of this disease who are in these relationships?
Right.
How do you see it? How do you see this, these two things being so closely linked?
It's a great question, and something I enjoy talking about and sharing with other people, because you hear a lot in abusive situations, it's not your fault, which is absolutely true. You're not responsible for, their actions and the things that happen to you. And then you come into, for me, like my recovery and my program today is, aligned with a 12-step program. And one of those 12 steps has to do with looking at your part. And so I had to look at my part in that. And it's like, wait, that's very confusing, because I very much use that relationship as an excuse of like, oh, well, that's why I was drinking. But I finally, when I was ready to do the work, I had to look at what my part was. And I think that the two are connected in the sense that I had an inability to set boundaries. I had a complete lack of self-love and self-respect. I wasn't able to say what was okay and what was not okay. And I think that those are probably the biggest things that I've had to work on in my recovery, is developing a strong enough relationship with myself that I have a deep level of self-love and self-respect, and that I'm willing to say what's okay and what's not okay. And sometimes to the degree where I'm now a little bit bossy. So I think I've swung to the other side of the, of the
so
spectrum.
But yeah. No, I mean, it's crazy hearing the story, because it's just, anybody who knows you today, it's, you're so far from that person. It's truly unimaginable. If you told me, if I didn't, know that, I remember the first time hearing that, it just blows my mind, because that's not who you are today. And that's what happens when people get into recovery and make those life changes, is they become totally different. They become who they were meant to be.
Right.
And I think that's what's happened for you. So did you get sober when he went to prison, or were you sober during the trial?
No. I was not sober during the trial. I did not drink the days that I testified.
That's helpful.
But yeah. And that would have been a mess. But I was definitely drinking during that time. I dove really heavily. It's kind of interesting, and I was thinking about this recently, how when the trial was over, it was supposed to, I think, give me a great sense of relief. Like, that's what I always assumed that it would do.
That's interesting, yeah.
But it didn't. It was this sense of a lack. I mean, I sort of had closure, but I had no closure. And then all of a sudden, I still had all these problems.
Right.
And I was,
Right, your problems didn't go to prison with him.
No. They were all alive and well.
Yeah.
And I feel like things just continued to spiral and get worse. And my family waited until the trial was over to offer me an opportunity to get help. So he went to prison in October of 2012. And then I quit the job. I had a full-time job during this time, which I have no idea what I was doing there. Yeah. I say full-time, like that's a big deal. Like a full-time 40-hour week.
Are you
job.
kidding me? That is a big deal. I am blown away.
So I quit that job in November after all of this to give myself some more time for my drinking, because I had to just dive more deeply into my only solution that I knew at that point. You know, alcohol was the answer to all of my problems, and it was the only coping mechanism I knew that worked.
Yeah. No, I completely relate to that. So what did that look like? How often were you drinking?
So at that point, my drinking had become very glamorous. I used to drink out of a, plastic gallon bottle of vodka.
Gosh. Yes, me too.
In my bathrobe.
Yeah.
In my parents'
wait,
basement.
That's not glamorous?
Living at 28 years old with my parents drinking a handle of vodka in my bathrobe. So it had gotten bad. It had gotten beyond sloppy. I had DTs. I was having seizures if I wasn't drinking.
For people who don't know what DTs are.
Oh, delirium tremens. So it's when your hands shake as a detox symptom of alcoholism. So like I would have to wake up in the morning and immediately drink because my hands would be shaking. So,
it's crazy. People don't know that one of the most dangerous substances to detox from is alcohol.
Yep.
And many people die as a result of attempting to detox from alcohol alone.
Super dangerous. Alcohol and benzos, the lovely combination.
Especially the combination.
I was
exactly.
engaging in.
That lovely ER doctor that gave you the Klonopin.
Yeah, exactly. And Klonopin was alive and well in my life, and that was my happy combination that I partook in every single day, all day. I mean, it was an existence between drinks at that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So how'd you end up getting sober?
So I, one morning, woke up and I, just as I did every morning, I pulled open the bureau drawer next to me where I'd stuck the bottle of alcohol, and I pulled the alcohol out. Like, it's like, open my eyes, grab for alcohol. Mm-hmm. Took a big swig of straight vodka and went downstairs, and one of my close friends was there, and he would stop by, to come hang out with me. He was close with my family, but usually not unannounced. Like, he usually would tell me if he was there. So I saw him, and he was in my living room, and I looked at him and I thought,
uh-oh, dun, dun, dun. Yeah,
what are you doing here? And then I saw my aunt walk in, and I knew.
Yeah. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, those are the key signs of an intervention forming.
Exactly. So I had sort of been to that party before when I had been ambushed in a therapist's office for wilderness years before.
Right.
When I didn't know, my parents were going to be showing up. So it was a familiar feeling. And I immediately resorted to anger and sarcasm. Mm-hmm. I was already drunk, and my family, read these heartfelt letters about how, I'd affected them, and I congratulated them all for expressing themselves so eloquently.
Oh, God. I mean, that's what you do in that situation. It's so intense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny because the interventionist who was sitting in my living room that day just commented on the Facebook post I put up this morning, congratulating me on 6 years sober. Yeah. And I had some choice words to say to her.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I refused to get on a plane with her and called her a variety of names. Yeah. So we had an intervention, and my mom asked who I wanted to fly out with me since I refused to go with the interventionist. She did not volunteer herself.
Naturally. All mine had to do was offer me cigarettes. I was kind of a cheap date that way.
You were.
So it's like, oh, okay, well, in that case, I guess I'll go.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it was, God.
Who'd you pick?
I picked my friend. My friend, my friend Chris. He was, willing to get on a plane and fly out to Southern California. I think he ended up spending about a week out here enjoying himself.
Yeah, exactly.
But he was somebody I felt super safe with. He was like a brother to me. And my younger brother was there too. And I think that was just a little too difficult for me to ask my younger brother. I mean, I sort of felt a sense of responsibility for him.
Right. Were you drunk on the way here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I immediately went upstairs and it's so funny thinking about the story. I went upstairs. At this time I had a Svedka glass. So it's a glass, but yeah.
You are stepping up your
right.
game.
Things were good. I had a glass bottle.
Glass. You know things are on the up and up when
classy.
we've moved from plastic to glass.
Yeah.
Okay. All
I
right.
had a little extra money in the bank those days. So I had a glass handle of Svedka in the shower. I was sitting on the shower floor and
with the shampoos.
right. Well, yeah. So I had the bottle with me, and my mom leaned into the shower. I told them, fine, F all of you, I'll go. And my mom leaned in to try and take the bottle away from me. And if you know anything about an alcoholic, you never try and take the alcohol away from them. No.
Yeah.
So our housekeeper, who's actually like a second mother to me, she said, no. Don't do that to her. She was a part of my intervention. This poor woman, she's been to the party with a couple of us.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, so she went and got a big and she knows what size I need. So she got a big plastic glass and poured me a tall glass of vodka and let me drink that in the shower while I just screamed and yelled and whatever. And I took, half a bottle of Klonopin and had a couple of drinks on the plane and was, I think, blowing who even knows, 0.39 or something like that when I got to detox in Southern California.
Yep.
And almost didn't make it through security on the way there.
That's actually one of the problems with my husband did a transport for someone from North Carolina to Malibu. And, he was doing his last hurrah too, right?
Yep.
He's on the way to detax.
You have to.
Yeah, but then he kept having to explain to the flight attendant, look, don't kick us off. We're going to
taking
detox.
her to treatment.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what my friend had to keep saying.
Yeah.
Please let her through.
Please let her through. This is an emergency. So you get to SoCal, and what a hardship. And detox. How was detox? I mean, that's kind of a trick question.
Yeah, detox was long.
Klonopin and benzos.
Yeah, they kept me for a while.
Yeah.
I got there, and it's funny because they asked me about, what was in my system, and I'm like, I don't know. A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And my friends weren't, my friend Chris, who came out here with me, he wasn't aware of the extent to, the extent to which things had gotten. And they were asking me, are you at risk for seizure? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I only drink on the weekends. Gosh. It was just comical. And he looks at me and he goes, you're at risk of a seizure? You couldn't. That's ridiculous. You're not that bad. And little did everybody know it was that bad. Yeah, so I was in detox for...
Did you have a seizure there?
No, no. They had me on a lot of detox meds.
Yeah.
A lot of phenobarbital and such.
For those of you listening, FYI, if you do need to detox, a note would be to go have a medical detox because
do it safely.
Do it safely because they will take care of you. It's actually much more pleasant than doing it at home.
100%. I was grateful for the for the supervision I had. I had people people coming in taking my blood pressure and all of that stuff. So I
grateful for supervision.
Yes. I needed all the supervision I could get.
The way things change. Okay, so you detox and get sober. What year are we?
2000. So that was 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you go back to Boston?
No. I detoxed I got probably, I don't know, 10 days, I think, 8 days, something like that. It was a long time. And then I went to 90 days of residential treatment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I needed the long stay.
Yeah, the long stay. Girl, you're telling me. I did multiple long stays.
Yeah.
So 90 days of treatment. And what do you think, some people, they get sober without treatment. They, people get sober in so many different ways, whether that's AA treatment, life rings, whatever. There's all sorts of different types of of programs. What do you think that inpatient treatment did for you?
Inpatient treatment allowed me the safety and the space to actually figure out what recovery was going to look like. And it allowed me a space to hear the message that I needed to hear. I mean, if I hadn't been in, first of all, it took 30 days for the fog to even clear.
Yep.
Like for me to even feel like my brain was even firing on half of a cylinder, it took some time because I'd spent so much time just living in an oblivion. So that was the first 30 days. And I honestly don't think there was a whole lot of absorbing of information during that time. So I needed this controlled environment to not only help me stop, but I needed a space where I could then be introduced to the solution that I know today. And there are so many different support groups and different ways of getting sober out there. And the way that I, did things doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way that it works for everybody. But for me, that's what it took. I needed a safe environment that could protect me from myself.
Yeah, absolutely. The one underlying factor about all the different types of recovery programs is that you're not doing it alone. That is the same in every single type of program philosophy, is that you don't do it alone. And it I think if you have that sober support, that sober community, that you can achieve long-term sobriety, long-term recovery, but you just simply, as they say, cannot fix your broken brain with your broken brain.
No, I mean, I did a lot of stupid things, but I'm a very smart person. And this is not something I could have ever figured out on my own.
Yeah, I relate to that. So you stayed in Southern California after the 90 days.
I did. I had every intention of going and being a good student, as I had out in like Montana and Utah and all of that.
Right.
And returning, a new version of myself, returning to Boston and going back to the same life. I had no intention. I came out here thinking that the reason I was drinking was because of the abuse I'd been through.
Right.
That was what I pointed with the finger
And you know
at.
what? It would have been so easy. What's amazing about you and the work that you've done, honestly, it would have been so easy to go with that narrative. But the narrative that is required for recovery is that you were drinking before you got into that relationship, that the drinking was what attracted you to him in some way because he was drinking the way you were drinking.
Definitely.
And we forget that stuff. We come out of this tornado of destruction and chaos and pain, and we blame it on that, the most recent thing that was behind us, when in reality we entered into that tornado with the problem.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and come out pointing fingers at everybody and everything rather than, back at myself for some of the things that I needed to take a look at, and that was all of the work that I needed to do in figuring out why is it that I time and time again turned to substances to treat whatever I had going on internally.
Right, that void that we share. And what's your life like now? So you got sober. I mean, gosh, it's went through all this stuff. You come to Southern California, you go through treatment, and what does it look like now?
My life's amazing. It's super simple, and I live in suburbia in Irvine, California, with a golden retriever.
Love it.
White picket fence.
Love it.
But it's really a simple way of life. Honestly, I am in a loving and healthy relationship today with a man who's also in recovery, who is kind and gentle and respectful and believes in me and doesn't get upset at me when I boss him around.
I mean, did you ever even think that was possible after everything you'd been through?
Absolutely not. I mean, I didn't imagine myself getting into another relationship, let alone that being possible. I didn't even know where to even begin to rebuild my life. And where I am today, looking at that compared to where I was when I first came out here, it's just unbelievable. And what I heard when I first started my recovery journey about just trusting in the process and allowing things to evolve, if I just focus on staying sober, I've never experienced something more truthful than that. And I immediately just wanted relief from all of the things that I had experienced. I wanted the quick fix, the quick answer. I wanted life back on track, but I didn't know what that meant. And I just trusted in the people who were giving me that guidance and that advice. And it's amazing if I look back at how all of the dots have connected and how it all has led to something that is pretty amazing, but so simple and so secure and so safe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing what happens when you just work the program or work whatever recovery you have or do the work as it's laid out without your own twist, without you just do it and unbelievable things unfold.
Absolutely. I tend to be a person, and I think I've always been like this at the core. I've always wanted to. I'm a solution looking for problems. Like I love to give other people advice, and not in an egotistical way or self-righteous way or anything like that. But I just love sort of giving direction and giving people advice, and it's amazing how in my own recovery, I have really trained myself to not do that with myself. I have remained teachable, and I have continued to remind myself to remain teachable, because when I start allowing my best ideas, to get going, that's what leads me into trouble a lot of time. And I need to have a support system that I get to run things by and ask people, have you had this similar experience? And find people who've had similar experiences so that they can give me the advice of how they did things. And that's, probably been one of the things that has served me the best in this journey.
That's amazing. And I totally relate to that. I think the older I get, the less I know, and the better it is when I just let things unfold the way they're meant to unfold.
Yeah.
And that was a very, very difficult concept for me when I first came into recovery.
Definitely. I heard somebody share a couple days ago about I couldn't have planned my life better than the way it turned out.
Right.
Like if you left it up to me, I couldn't have planned it this way.
The one I heard that I love is, I have everything I never knew I wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so true. It's so true. I mean, in Orange County, where you are as successful as your car, and I'm driving a Toyota minivan, I mean, you'd think I was on the struggle bus. But, the truth is that it's perfect. When you look for the beauty and the joy and you force yourself to find gratitude first, then when the problems surface, the gratitude, if you've already found the gratitude, if you've already looked for it, the problems start to pale in comparison. At least for me, they do.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. And I think what I've been able to find in the sense of comfort and peace that I have had the gift of in this recovery journey, whenever life gets going, those challenges come up and that discomfort arises, I still know how to get back to that comfort. I still know how to get back to that sense of calm and peace and ease, which is what I was searching for the whole time.
Yeah, right. That's what we were searching for the whole time. What do you think you would tell someone who was in early recovery with your story, who struggled with the intersection of alcoholism and domestic violence as part of their story, and they're trying to get sober now?
Well, I think as far as the way to approach that, I think it's important to find somebody that you trust, somebody that you're safe with sharing that information with. And I would direct somebody to take a look at not only the relationship with substances, but the relationship in the relationship, and how no matter what situation we find ourselves in, whether it's a relationship with substances or personal relationships, that life can get unmanageable pretty quickly. And that I think there is definitely a parallelism with the two, in that I was, for me, I found some escape in that relationship. It awarded me something that alcohol did as well. So there's always a conclusion, I think, that can be drawn from the two. if that makes sense.
Absolutely. You can be addicted to people.
100%.
And frankly, in my experience, it's harder to detox from.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. I think that there are a lot of things in life that we can find ourselves struggling with. And I think relationships, just like people who struggle with eating disorders, we can't not eat. We can't not have relationships with people. So finding how to have a healthy relationship is definitely challenging. I know for myself that started with finding a relationship with myself.
Thank you so much, Bahan, for coming on and talking about this. I know that it is not an easy subject to discuss, particularly in detail, and I'm really grateful that you were willing to do that with us and have listeners get the opportunity to know you better and maybe relate to things that they may or may not have told people about. If you're listening to this and you find yourself struggling in a relationship where there is domestic violence going on, please know that there is help out there. You can call 1-800-799-7233. The National Domestic Violence Hotline can help victims, survivors of domestic violence. Chat with an advocate on the website as well. That is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will catch you on the next episode. The Courage to Change, a recovery podcast, would like to thank our sponsor, Lionrock Recovery, for their support. Lionrock Recovery provides online substance abuse counseling where you can get help from the privacy of your own home. For more information, visit www.lionrockrecovery.com/podcast. Subscribe and join our podcast community to hear amazing stories of courage and transformation bi-weekly.